It's The World This Week. The World This Week in partnership with the Daily Beast. Daily Beast world editor Nico Hines is in the UK capital, London. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Good evening.
Good evening as well to Vivian Walt, Paris correspondent for Time Magazine. How are things?
Great, good to be here.
They're great?
Summer's here.
All right. Summer's here. Lockdown is easing. Régis Le Sommier, associate editor-in-chief at Paris Match, has graced us with his presence. How are you?
I'm very good. Good to be back.
Good to be back. Good to see you.
Yep.
And from Brussels, I guess she had to report to the mothership. Reem Momtaz, Paris correspondent for Politico. What are you doing in the European capital?
It's top secret. I would never tell you.
All right. Okay, well, I guess we'll read about it in Politico. The World This Week on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag World This Week. It's so brazen that it borders on the unbelievable.
Могу заявить, что никаких проблем со здоровьем, в том числе с сердцем или с какими-либо
Roman
другими.
Protasevich confessing from custody after the 26-year-old dissident's journalist plane was forced to make an unscheduled stop in Minsk. A MiG-29 fighter jet sent up to escort the Ryanair plane that was en route from Greece to Lithuania. His parents say his nose seems broken in that video and that he shows signs of being roughed up. As they worry about his fate and that of his partner, it's clear that it's a message sent to all those reporting from the outside on the post-electoral crackdown in Belarus.
They said they will kill me, that Roman got lucky, but I will just get gunned down in Warsaw. So it's hard to sleep, I have nightmares, and I often picture myself in Roman's place.
Vivian Walt, you listen to those who feel intimidated. And by the way, we had the head of another media, Tut.by, telling us, he fears kidnappings and being taken across the border. In that sense, it's mission accomplished, isn't it, if Alexander Lukashenko's aim was to intimidate?
I mean, absolutely. And in fact, I had met all of these opposition activists just a few months ago. They'd all gathered in Brussels. The head of the opposition, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, told me after the plane was, shall we say, pirated on Sunday, that she was just completely stunned that this was actually a flight that she had taken 1 week earlier. And it didn't even cross her mind that something like this might happen. But this had totally changed the picture, even given the nervousness that they've been under in Vilnius, where most of them are in exile. They say that they are like deeply, deeply nervous now. It's only a 3-hour drive from Belarus. They're very, very close by, and they feel now completely on the front line and utterly vulnerable.
Utterly vulnerable, and there have been these claims over what happened. Belarus authorities say there was a bomb threat by Hamas. It was swiftly denied by the Palestinian group. The Daily Beast reports that the email to airport authorities claiming the threat came 24 minutes after the Ryanair jet was diverted. Allah Akbar runs the subject line of the email, the center of which Nico Hines was Ahmed_Yurlanov 1988 at proton.mail. What does that tell you?
Well, it subsequently turned out that email address was only set up a week or so ago. I think, it's almost tempting to kind of find it funny because the KGB's efforts here to cover it up and come up with this false Hamas story are so obviously clumsy, so unbelievable as to be kind of laughable on the face of it. But you have to remember that, as we've just heard from those activists, that this is effectively an act of terror, that these people are now so scared that they may reconsider what they're doing. Some of them might decide to give up the activism. Others might just move away from Vilnius to somewhere that they think to be somewhere safer. But the kind of bungling of the KGB at times seems laughable. But I guess the truth is it's just really old-fashioned. And this is kind of taking us back to scary eras of the past where dictators did whatever they wanted to their subjects.
Yeah, just to remind our viewers, the KGB is what it is still called inside of Belarus. It's not the FSB.
Yeah, they haven't even bothered upgrading the name. One of the interesting things about this is that the FSB was recently put out a statement along with the KGB. So the FSB in Russia put out a joint statement with the KGB talking about a foiled coup plot that had been hatched by the West and was trying to kill Lukashenko and his son, who is now at school in Moscow. So it's very obvious that whether or not Putin was directly involved in this, he has allowed the two intelligence agencies to work very closely together. And we know that for Putin, the importance of intelligence agencies cannot be overestimated. So he is putting his top guys on the case of helping this crazed leader in Europe.
Régis Le Sommier, this is happening right on the heels of the U.S. lifting those sanctions on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, just as they're trying to get that summit together in Geneva between Biden and Putin. Do you think Russia had a hand in this?
Well, I think Lukashenko is sort of playing a wild card over there because he knows the importance of Roman's work, to actually he was instrumental in actually creating this movement against Lukashenko. So I think there's something personal between that dictator that looks right now, has been looking, on a hotspot for quite a while. So I don't know if Putin is behind. I think it's more of an embarrassment for Russia at this point to have this, diversion of a private a company, a European company, Ryanair, a plane between two European Union member states, Greece and Lithuania. So this is obviously something that the Russian would have loved to avoid. But, we have to...
An embarrassment, but also an opportunity, perhaps, because the end result is here we have Lukashenko this Friday in Sochi, and Russia can draw him closer. And
maybe Putin will try to, look like with this like a token. But we have to bear in mind that's one argument that was raised, and I think which is pretty relevant, is back in the day, remember 2013 when Evo Morales was in Russia.
I'll interrupt you right there, because Vladimir Putin spoke exactly about that. They thought Edward Snowden was aboard the plane of the Bolivian president. He was returning from Moscow. All the countries except Vienna, Austria, allowed him to land for refueling. Here's what Vladimir Putin had to say.
There was a time when they landed the Bolivian president's plane. They escorted the president out of the plane, and nothing, just silence.
I think if you remember the story back then, that was a big story, and the Americans were put on a hot spot back then because it was obvious that the American had a hand in having this plane land in Vienna, and later on they thought they had intel that Snowden might have been, but we have to wonder what may have happened to Snowden had it been on board of that plane and had it been arrested in Vienna. In America, Snowden is considered a traitor, and he might very well have been, brought to a black spot the CIA has run for years in this country. So, I think it's fair game for Putin to actually to stress this argument.
Reem Mumtaz, you agree? Forcing a passenger jet to land is the same as forcing a plane, a presidential plane in this instance.
I mean, we're not here to draw comparisons. Both instances are just insane if we are on the side of any kind of international rules-based system. What happened on Sunday was basically, I mean, I don't know how anyone can see it in any other way, which is that the Belarusian president, Lukashenko, was kind of double daring the European leaders a day before their European Council summit in which they were supposed to discuss their relationship with Russia. He was double daring them, one, forcing the landing of this plane, two, kidnapping this activist and journalist, three, then saying that Hamas was behind it. I mean, it was like he just looked at a headline and Hamas was in the headlines a week before because of the hostilities with Israel. He's like, oh, what's the least plausible thing that I can throw onto this already insane scenario? And then four, while the European leaders were meeting, he brings out what can only be described as a hostage video of Roman Protasevich. And so at this point, I mean, it's really just, one has to wonder, are the European leaders not only playing in the same league as the Belarusian president, but also obviously Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, are they even in the same match? I mean, today, Putin meeting with Lukashenko, it is sending a message. It is sending a message. Putin is sending a message to the Europeans saying, you know, you think what he did was awful? Well, I'm still going to meet him and he's my friend.
Okay, so here's the
So
question.
now the question is, what are the Europeans going to do?
I was going to say, Reem, you might say, in a way, Lukashenko giving the gift to the EU leaders that, for once, a bloc that's often accused of seeming irrelevant on foreign policy, for once offering this gift by doing this on the eve of that summit, of being able to say that, you know, this time the Europeans can proudly say they're speaking as one. But as you mentioned, with Vladimir Putin meeting Lukashenko this Friday, would you say that it's been a good or a bad week for the EU on this?
I mean, it's been a so-so week, just like, you know, the EU is constantly middling, if not failing, at foreign policy. And that's the main issue here, which is that, you know, the European Commission speaks of being a geopolitical commission and a geopolitical actor, but the EU is constantly just reacting. They're always on the back foot. And then you just have to wonder, are they ever going to be able to recover the initiative when they deal with adversaries like the Russian President Putin? I mean, they're not playing in the same field yet again. And so, yes, of course, this time around, they did take some measures. You know, they did decide these sanctions quicker than the last time around when it came to the fraud of the elections in Belarus, where it took them 3 months to decide these sanctions. Clearly, anyway, sanctions are not deterring anyone at this stage. Okay, great. So they decided to have these sanctions. We're going to wait to see, you know, how this gets through the legal churning machine to be actually implemented. Of course, they recommended that airlines stop flying through the Belarusian airspace. And European airlines had already started doing it before the European leaders said that. What I wonder is, why didn't they, for example, say that they were going to refuse access to the European airspace to any airline, not just the Belarusian airline, that uses the Belarusian airspace? Because why? They're trying to avoid confrontation with Russia. But Putin today meets with Lukashenko. Is he trying to avoid confrontation? Doesn't seem like it.
Doesn't seem like it. Vivian Walt, so then what does the EU do? Do they...
I mean, basically, the EU clearly wants Lukashenko out. The problem is that the road to doing that goes through Moscow, and there's just no getting around it. You cannot really confront
And
this
we
government.
had one Polish member of the European Parliament this week saying, this is partly Germany's fault, he said. If they're doing a deal for the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, then they're giving Putin the oxygen to do this.
Well, that's absolutely correct. And the fact is, you know, there's not a whole lot of love lost between Putin and Lukashenko. It's clear for many years that Putin has not really liked him very much, and the things he hasn't gotten out of Lukashenko that he wanted to, for example, a real military base, etc. But he's the devil they know, which is better than the devil you don't know. And the last thing he wants is these, opposition activists to take over. And, Belarus is a pathetic little economy, but it happens to be unbelievably well strategically placed between NATO and Russia.
Régis Le Sommier?
this stress, I mean, when we look at the situation, and especially on the eve of this European Union summit, is that the weakness of Europe. And this is not the first time.
So what could Europe have done?
I mean, Europe could have, the problem is we have Merkel that's on her way out. We have Macron, who's never convinced the rest of the 27 that he would be the new leader. So we have, people playing different games and different, and trying to find, for once, maybe a common voice, but this is only for Belarus, Russia. Remember what Erdogan did, with Greece, confronting Greece. Europe was not able to find a common voice back then because of the relation between Turkey and Germany, and Germany was on the hot spot then because they weren't saying anything to what this aggression against Greece. And what happened? France had to send a ship on Eastern Mediterranean to be able to deter somehow the aggression of Erdogan. And what happened back then is that Erdogan took it personally with Macron, and there was this rhetoric but the European Union was not able to find a common voice. And this time around we're playing the same thing. Germany struck a deal with Russia with the Nord Stream 2. There's common interest. Nobody wants to really confront Russia. Let's put it that way. Maybe the U.S. and more. The U.S. is about to, Biden is about to have a meeting with Putin. So nobody's going to go to confront Russia. So Putin is, of course, doing what he loves the most, playing chess and having a pawn who's Lukashenko. And come in.
All right.
Let's do let's talk.
And in the there's no such thing as bad publicity department, Alexander Lukashenko offering Joe Biden a chance to have that summit with Vladimir Putin, to move it from Geneva to Minsk, since, after all, they'll be talking about him.
Может быть, рискнет, мы же запросто посадить самолет можем. У нас полоса. Две полосы, на любую сядем. Истребители поднимем и будем сопровождать от границы со Швейцарией. 3 истребителя.
We can send fighters to escort them from the Swiss border, he says, Nico Hines.
It's funny because it makes you think that Putin must be really annoyed that he didn't come up with such a brave and daring move as Lukashenko has to bring this plane down. I mean, Putin always tries to sort of pretend that he had nothing to do with these crazy incidents. But Lukashenko has just boldly gone and done something that even Putin wouldn't have dared to do, or perhaps he now will, inspired by his friend.
But will he really? Hang on a second.
Because
Nico, would he really? Because is it in your interest to be launching this kind of precedent? That means the others can do it too.
Right, but it's not fighting fire with fire, is it? I don't think France is going to start bringing down Russian planes and arresting people that they don't like. We have to remember that, yes, there are some basically dictators in Europe and the surrounds, but the EU is not in the business of regime change, and nor should it be. The EU is there to be a safe and stable and boring and respectable and responsible body. And what it needs to do, it needs to focus on the economic ties that it has with these countries, and it needs to make sure that Russia and that Belarus realise that it's in their economic interests to behave in a kind of rules-based international order. And so I do think that the Nord Stream pipeline should be re-evaluated, perhaps got rid of. And I do think that economic sanctions are the answer. It might be a slow and gradual response, but the only way to do this in a kind of fair, rules-based way is to make those rogue regimes realise that it's easier for them to just get along.
Much more to talk about when we come back. Stay with us. You're watching The World This Week. Welcome back. Before we resume The World This Week, some of the stories we're following for you. Vladimir Putin hosts Alexander Lukashenko in Sochi, this after the forced diversion of that Ryanair plane. Russia continues to retaliate over countries that sanctioned Belarus. Air France, for the second time this week, forced to cancel a Paris-Moscow flight. Emmanuel Macron in South Africa. The French president touts a plan to boost African COVID vaccine production and says his navy's ready to provide sea support in the fight against jihadists in neighboring Mozambique. Europe's medicines regulator approves the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID jab for 12 to 15-year-olds. And Britain's Simon Yates wins stage 19 of the Giro, 28 seconds ahead of pink jersey holder Egan Bernal. The Colombian's overall lead reduced to under 3 minutes ahead of Sunday's finale. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's The World This Week. The World This Week in partnership with the Daily Beast. Daily Beast world editor Nico Hines joins us from London. Vivian Walt, Paris correspondent for Time magazine, is with us here. Régis Le Sommier, associate editor-in-chief of a newsweekly magazine, Paris Match. And from Brussels, Reem Momtaz, Paris correspondent for Politico. It's only up to those who've endured the night to decide whether to offer the gift of forgiveness. The words of Emmanuel Macron at the Rwanda Genocide Memorial in Kigali. This was a long-awaited acknowledgement of France's role in those 100 days of horror back in 1994. Macron insists there is no proof that France actively participated in the genocide, but basing himself on the conclusions of a blue-ribbon panel of historians, he did more than just recognize Paris's backing of the Hutu-led regime, its failure to act more forcefully, and its failure as well to see the warning signs beforehand.
France did not understand that while trying to safeguard against a regional conflict or a civil war, it was still standing by a genocidal regime. By ignoring the warnings of the most lucid observers, France then bore a damning responsibility in a spiral that led to the worst, even though it was precisely what it was trying to avoid.
Régis Le Sommier, did he find the right words?
Well, I think he tried to, it was delicate. This has been pushed for years,
27 of them, in fact.
Yes, and remember, in several of his predecessors wanted to tackle the problem and they did not. So I think he came to terms with something, and tried to actually put a step back in Africa, which is, I think, the main goal of this. He did not give proper excuse from France, which was what some people were demanding that. So I think he tried to find a middle way, admitting France had a responsibility, where while saying France could not foresee what was going to happen, and France had no direct involvement. But France had an indirect responsibility, so he did not excuse France for that. He did not ask for, excuse. So I think, in a way, he played it rather smartly.
Yeah, and Rwanda's president, who was a rebel leader during the genocide, says the truth is better than an apology. Paul Kagame, pleased with what Macron said. Survivors of the genocide say they wanted more, but acknowledging it is a breakthrough.
Pour moi, il a vraiment parlé, il a essayé d'expliquer le génocide, comment ça s'est passé, qu'est-ce qu'ils n'ont pas fait, expliquer leur responsabilité. C'est très important, ça montre qu'il nous comprend. Alors, même s'il n'a pas clairement présenté ses excuses, quand même, tu vois qu'il comprend tout, c'est quelque chose qui pourra venir après.
An excuse can come later. Do you expect an excuse, Reem Momtaz, to come later?
It won't come from this president. It won't be Emmanuel Macron who presents an apology because the Élysée has this theory and this doctrine when it comes to coming to terms with France's checkered past, whether it's the war in Algeria after 132 years of colonization or the Rwanda genocide, which is no denial, no repentance. And so they are doing the work of trying to recognize at least the facts that happened, but they are not of the the idea and of the opinion that apologizing for anything that France may have done, directly or indirectly, is actually constructive. The idea is that, if you present apologies, then, it's never really enough. You're always getting sucked in to present even more. I think what's interesting is, we have to listen to what the Rwandans feel. And from the clip that you just played, it's clear that, it's a good first step. It was an important step that Emmanuel Macron did, to go to Kigali, to go to the memorial and say that France does have responsibilities, even though he was at pains and he really went, he took his time to try to also make sure to say that the French military did not have blood on its hands, that France was not complicit, but of course recognizing that it had a role and that it had responsibilities. And so it's a first step. The Rwandans have recognized it as such, but clearly at some point, at least for the time being, they're still expecting some sort of apology.
He said more than just a role. He talked about a damning responsibility, Vivian.
I mean, most certainly, if you read the report, which is voluminous, it's an enormous report by the historians about France's role. I mean, firstly, they had a lot of advanced intelligence. There's no doubt about it, about what was going to happen. They also, actively helped finance, arm, and they really, this genocide might not have happened without their cooperation, collaboration. But, as Reem says, these things do take time. This is very much a tentative first step. If you think, coincidentally, this happened right at the same time as Germany just admitted its genocide in Namibia and is offering $1 billion in billion euros, perhaps, in compensation. So that was a century ago. This is a first step. I think the wounds, the emotional wounds, are still pretty deep.
I think there was a need also to set the record straight, because for too many years, for way too many years, the French involvement in the genocide was suggested by many. There was many rumors. There was many. Piece even written by, stressing the fact that France was actively involved, especially some French leaders, and some
what
ministers.
These historians say is don't look at the military, look at the political responsibility, and they name the then president François Mitterrand, which Emmanuel Macron did not in that speech.
He did not, but even Mitterrand, if you look, at the detailed report, as you said, by a historian, Mitterrand had not any intention of getting involved on one side or the other, and had no conceived, feeling of what was going to happen, and I think this was important, and I think that's probably one of Macron's maybe most carefully watched speech before it was pronounced, because all the words are important, and from before, during, and after, France was not actively involved. France was there as peacekeeping force, and Belgium was there too. But it's I think it's important, and I think the word were chosen very carefully, and the words chosen by Macron was the right ones.
Nico Heinz, your thoughts on this French president who tries to grapple with history. It's Rwanda this time. It's going to be, by the way, 60th anniversary coming up in the spring, just before the presidential election of France's treaty that ended its occupation of Algeria. Your thoughts on that?
I do think that these kind of truth and reconciliation type moments are really important. Once everybody admits to what happened, it's not so, sometimes people are desperate for justice, but sometimes if you put that to one side and you just say, this is what happened, we all agree, let's move on, I think that can be really helpful and end the kind of cycle of recriminations that can go on for decades. I do think it's interesting with this Rwanda case, this is a big win for Paul Kagame, and I think he's not so different to Lukashenko and Putin, if you think about it. He's got death squads roaming the earth, taking out opposition figures. He's got, he kidnapped someone on a plane and brought them for this kind of show trial in Kigali. So it's kind of odd that basically what France was accused of doing during the genocide was turning a blind eye to the barbarism. And Macron is there now, rightly taking part in his kind of historical reckoning, but at the same time effectively turning a blind eye to the barbarism of the current leader.
Vivian Walt, of course, let's not be naive. There is, as you know, a French presidential election coming up in now less than a year's time. Part of it is courting votes at home. And in this particular case, showing he's from a new generation, showing that he wants to court the diaspora, all those who are dual nationals, right, from sub-Saharan Africa. And he's now in South Africa, and it's the same sort of thing. He's been talking alongside his South African counterpart, Cyril Ramaphosa, about COVID, about engaging young people. Again, it's this... it's with an eye to the French presidential election.
Absolutely. And everything, I think every time we talk about President Macron from now on is going to have to be in the context of the presidential election less than 1 year from now. And you can see this every step of the way. The interview he gave with the YouTubers.
We'll talk about that in a moment. What Viv is referring to, when Macron returns Saturday, he's due to attend an indoor rock concert that's acting as a science experiment. 7,000 people getting tested to see 80s rock band Indochine. Only 5,000 will get tickets so that there's a sample group of unlucky losers. They'll be monitoring them too. And all the young people eager to attend summer festivals, really the target audience, you might say, for this event. It is, again, a French presidential year next year. And as Vivian alludes to, same when he invites these two popular YouTubers to the presidential palace.
La question que vous me posez, c'est est-ce qu'il est vrai que vous avez voté pour quelqu'un d'autre que moi?
Monsieur le Président, cette anecdote est-elle vraie ou fausse?
C'est vrai.
Pardon, mais c'est vrai.
J'étais sûr parce que vous aviez dit que vous n'alliez pas rompre le secret. Donc
Ah ouais, je me suis fait avoir.
Mumtaz, that was very slickly produced and entertaining to watch. Reminds me of Barack Obama when he was with the podcaster, what was it, the Two Ferns. And is it an infomercial, that sitting down with those two YouTubers?
I mean, what else is it? It's absolutely him being in campaigning and definitely being now running for president, even though his advisors keep saying he is not running for president right now. He is just focused on delivering results. Of course, this is part of their comms approach now to make him more relatable, to make him more human. It's part of a larger rollout. He also gave like a 20-page interview. I mean, I think that, first of all, Emmanuel Macron actually is quite popular among the 18 to 24-year-olds. The issue with that electorate is that it's very flimsy. There's a high level of abstention on election day in that electorate, and some of them still like Marine Le Pen. The 24 to 30-year-olds tip more toward Marine Le Pen. So I'm still trying to understand what Emmanuel Macron thinks he's going to get out of trying to address this younger electorate just so blatantly. The other thing is, and I thought it was interesting because, as you know, I cover him day to day. I did see in this 35-minute interview, I mean, I don't think it's an interview, it's some sort of entertainment show. I did see glimpses of the Emmanuel Macron that the Élysée press corps gets to see rarely, but every once in a while, when we are traveling with him and we see him at the end of a long night of work, for example. he can be laid back that way. But what's a little problematic with him is that from the moment he became president, he theorized this idea of him being what he calls a Jupiterian president, a very vertical, very solemn president. And now this entertainment thing that he just did goes against it. And so I wonder how many people in France just wonder, so who is the real Emmanuel Macron? And perhaps that is the central question, which is if the French people are still wondering 5 or 6 years in, who is this president? What does he really stand for? What kind of person is he? Then maybe there's an issue there.
All right. We'll of course have plenty of time to revisit this in the build-up to that election next April 1st round, May 2nd round. Before we go, out of the mouth of Donald Trump, it might have sounded like China bashing. So how about when Joe Biden orders his intelligence services to get on the case? The Wall Street Journal reporting that 3 researchers from China's Wuhan Institute of Virology became sick enough in November 2019 that they sought hospital care. That's according to, quote, undisclosed U.S. intelligence. A World Health Organization fact-finding team did visit a few months back. It was eventually let in under close watch after much wrangling. So any chance that Beijing will open up its files to U.S. scientists? All right, we heard from the Chinese foreign ministry spokesperson on that score.
美国新冠肺炎确诊和死亡病例数分别超过3300万和60万，位居全球首位。美国不深刻反思，反而企图甩锅中国。
You're a former U.S. correspondent. Can they sleep at night with an untroubled conscience? Asks the foreign ministry.
I think that's so outrageous from the Chinese because actually a team of scientists went to try to gather some, and they were given hard time over there. They could not really get access to. So they came with some sort of analysis, but nothing was really open. What's interesting was what this story, and especially with Joe Biden actually right now, putting this story back alive. For sometimes remember when Trump was pointing this, it was conspiracy. It was like this Wuhan thing. We accuse many animals of having spread but nobody was daring to say that from that P4 laboratory the virus could have come out. Now this was close to a conspiracy theory. Now it's back to being very credible, especially with Biden asking his intel to try to see and to dig the story more. I mean, I'm excited that this could be an explanation, but the Chinese, of course, are going to deny it all the way.
All right. There's the origins of COVID, and then there's the early days of the pandemic. And when the once all-powerful communications advisor to Boris Johnson turns on the boss and spills the beans before a parliamentary committee, well, it's not for the faint of heart.
The problem in this crisis was very much lions led by donkeys over and over again. The whole logic is completely wrong. If we don't bring in a proper border policy now, and a bunch of other things, we're going to have a second wave in the autumn, and everything is going to be shut. Forget just tourism. But he was, he had the Daily Telegraph with their stupid campaign on the whole subject. He had Tory MPs going crackers about it at the same time. And essentially at that point, he was in, we should never have done lockdown, I should have been the mayor of Jaws, now I'm going to be, open everything up, get on with it.
So, Nico Hines, we could play, they're great sound bites of Dominic Cummings from that testimony. We could play them all evening. But the question is, what did that achieve? Because those who support Boris Johnson will take it with a smirk. Those who hate Boris Johnson already hated Dominic Cummings.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is you could play those clips for 7 hours because that's how long he sat in Parliament giving the real inside story of what happened. And, you know, I don't think that that's ever been seen before at a scale of a crisis like this that's still ongoing, to have the actual number one advisor to the Prime Minister lifting the lid on the genuine panic that was happening in those behind those closed doors. You know, he recounted one of the top civil servants barging into number 10 in the early days and saying, I was told that there was a plan for these sorts of things. It turns out there isn't a plan. We're all bleeped. And, you know, I think it is genuinely shocking. And, of course, I'm not saying that Boris Johnson's going to be chased from number 10 in the next few hours, but there is no way that it's not damaging to learn that he basically thought the whole thing was a bit of a joke. He was more interested in finalising the terms of his latest divorce than he was in engaging with the details of this at the beginning. He was taking time off to write his biography so that he could raise money to pay off his various children. You know, the characterisation of Boris Johnson as someone who doesn't take these things seriously is already out there. But I think when you're talking about 122,000 people dead, it hits a little differently.
But is Dominic Cummings a credible witness for the prosecution?
No, he's not, but he knows that himself. He's a smart guy. So he didn't just come there and make a load of accusations. He came there with photographs of the whiteboard where they'd come up with these harebrained schemes at the time. He had the text messages that he could read out from other civil servants, other people from behind the scenes, describing just how badly this had gone. And he had quotes from other people that are trusted within the organisation. So he was painting a very compelling picture. And although it's true that some people will just think, oh, he's bitter, he's deluded, the fact is he's kept the receipts.
Okay, kept the receipts, kept the evidence. So we're going to leave it there. Nico Hines, I want to thank you so much for joining us from London. Reem Mumtaz in Brussels. Come back to Paris soon. Vivian Walt, Régis Le Sommier, thank you for being with us here in The World This Week.